Hello and welcome to Friday the 13th, ladies and gentlemen. What does that mean to you? I'll tell you what it means to be. I will be headlining Soul Joel's Comedy Club this evening if you're listening on Friday the 13th in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Come on out if you're anywhere near there. I would like to meet you, to see you, and make you laugh. Very happy to have you listening to today's episode of Stand Up. It's been a great week, and my intern Odessa started this week. She's been great. Last night we had our Stand Up Happy Hour hangout. I bet that was great, though I'm recording this before that, so I might not even live through it. And on today's show, I've got great guest. Colin Jerolmack is back on the show. He is awesome. He is a big deal professor of both sociology and environmental studies. I think he's the chair of environmental studies at NYU, New York University, a PhD in sociology, a bachelor's in psychology. He's the author of two great books, most recently Up to Heaven and Down to Hell, which I could not recommend anymore. Up to Heaven and Down to Hell, Fracking, Freedom, and Community in an American Town. And I caught up with Colin to talk to him about the natural gas industry and the whole controversy or fake controversy over people being concerned that the government's going to come and take away their gas ovens, which has gotten really carried away. But we have a really thoughtful conversation about natural gas. I learned a lot from this very important conversation. He's super passionate, super smart. I love talking to him, and I think you're going to love that conversation. Then after that, I welcomed Christian Finnegan and Ophir Eisenberg, both joining me together again, as they often do on Fridays to wrap up the week. Really, we just bullshitted about a lot of nonsense, some tangential to the news, some to our lives. It was fun and interesting and awesome as always. They're so great. That's today's show. Don't generally do the news really on Friday either because I'm up late doing the hangout, which I am about to start. So gotta go, which I'm about to start. So I hope you like today's show. Thank you for all your positive feedback on this week's show. Lots of conversation. Great conversation with Eric Siegel yesterday. Tony Hillary of Harlem Grown. The first edition of SUPD Gen Z posting yesterday with Lucy Solomon. Great talk with Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who hasn't been on the show a while, on Monday. Mara Quint, of course, joining me back from Australia. And, of course, on Tuesdays, spoke with author, political analyst, and filmmaker, the great Jonathan Alter. So a great week of shows here on Stand Up, and I cannot do it without your paid subscription. I don't think we got any new subscribers this week. How about that? Hopefully we didn't lose any either, but we'd love to have you be a part of our community, and I can't do the show without your support, so please consider signing up and supporting the show. It is ad-free as of now. Love to keep it that way, but I need more subscribers to make sure we can. And obviously, it's always great to get more listeners on the show, but I love this community. I'm so happy to have you. If you want to join us, standupwithpete.com right now. All right. I told you all about Colin Jerolmack just now. He is an environmental studies professor at NYU. We talked natural gas and caught up. He's awesome. You should follow him on Twitter at Jerolmack, Jerolmack. Of course, get his book, Up to Heaven and Down to Hell, and listen to our conversation right now. All right. Well, I have got the Professor Jerolmack joining me now, and I'm very excited to have you back. It's been way too long. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining me.
Oh man, it's awesome to be with you again.
Are you gonna take my gas stove from me?
Yes.
Oh.
But I don't want to tell you when. I'm planning a midnight raid.
Oh, it's going to be... Don't you think it'd be hard to get it out, even if you had daylight and you weren't stealing it?
You probably don't have guns, though, right? You're too liberal for that. So
I like to not tell people.
Worried.
I like to not tell... Yes, I have Gatling guns in every window. I have a cannon. And you should know that we have RPG rocket-propelled grenades here. So don't come and take my gas-powered stove.
Okay.
Let's just talk about natural gas. You've written a really interesting piece following up on your book, of course, and you had your eye and your ear on the industry, and you understand it. I mean, let's just go back to kind of the beginning, or look at where the natural gas industry is today and how it's burrowed itself into being a huge and very important part of our lives and our homes. Where are they at today? They're doing very well, is my understanding.
Yeah, they're doing pretty well. So, we've long had, methane is typically what we're talking about. We're talking about natural gas. Although propane is also a more, liquid gas that also fuels a lot of stoves and furnaces. And we've long had it as an energy source in our portfolio. But where it really took off was when the so-called fracking revolution, where we developed the technology to drill down into shale rock and then drill horizontally through shale rock, break it up, get all of the gas, and in the West, oil that's been trapped in that shale rock, and bring it on out. And the fracking revolution really took off in the late 2000s. And so then you've got a state like Pennsylvania, for instance, which really sort of stopped being a major producer of natural resources in the 30s and 40s, becoming the so-called Saudi Arabia of natural gas, right?
Because they used to make oil. There's all these old oil towns in West Pennsylvania. They're scary towns. I performed in every one of them. I mean, they're old oil places, right?
That's right. But they were to be honest, they were very like sort of podunk and wildcat. Like you find a little pocket of oil and you pump it out. But there weren't really any big gushers that provided wealth for decades. But, the shale rock, the Marcellus Shale Formation, which also sits underneath New York State, but New York State banned fracking in 2014. It's one of the largest shale gas deposits in the world. And so, there's enough gas under there to potentially power U.S. homes for like a century, right? So we knew it was there for 100 years, couldn't get to it until the late 2000s. So this fracking boom takes off. And all of a sudden, Pennsylvania becomes one of the largest shale gas producers in America. And so now we've basically, by the teens, you've got a crap ton of this stuff. So much of it, you don't even know what to do with all of it. And so you've got the building of all these liquefied natural gas facilities so that we could try to liquefy and ship this stuff, because you can't really ship it in gas form to Europe and other places. And then that's in progress. And then, Russia comes along. So now we have this argument. The industry has this argument that's all patriotic. Well, we can sell our gas to Europe, and they're not reliant on Putin anymore. And the Trump administration even called natural gas molecules of U.S. freedom. That was like an official press release.
No, I never saw that or heard that. That's hilarious. If it wasn't so horrifying. Molecules of what?
Of U.S. freedom. Yeah.
Wow. Jeez, that's great. That sounds great. That's some good branding. I like it.
Yeah. And so now, and I should just say, by the way, that it takes many years to build liquefied natural gas facilities. So the idea that the industry convincing America to double down on building LNG facilities now to help Europe doesn't really work. I mean, maybe in 2028, these facilities will come online. So just to be clear, the industry is looking for every opportunity, especially in a moment where people are well aware of the climate emergency. There's greater and greater urgency and push to get onto renewable energy sources. The capacity for renewables is up. And so they're looking for any way to build pipelines, to build out facilities that are going to lock us into fossil fuel development for decades ahead, right? You build one of these facilities that's $1 or $2 billion, right? And you're going to run that thing for decades.
How am I and homes and apartment buildings locked into natural gas heating, cooking, et cetera?
Especially if you don't own a home where you have your own personal delivery, but you're hooked into a system. So for instance, in Philadelphia, and in New York City, many of them, but in Philadelphia, almost every townhouse and apartment building is hooked up to PNG, Philadelphia Natural Gas. So it's really difficult for you to get off of that. That's the energy source that you're getting, just like you get your municipal water supply through the pipes. In my apartment building in Manhattan, it's all natural gas stoves. And even if my employer, NYU, who owns my apartment building, wanted to do the right thing, they have to rip out all of these gas pipes, and then they have to increase the electrical capacity of the building, because if we're all going to have electric ranges or natural gas ranges, they require 220 volt outlets rather than the standard 120. So now,
that's a tremendous infrastructure project within an apartment building. And it's also true of where I live in the suburbs in Rockland County. I got a gas pipe that comes into my house, and so do all of my neighbors. Yep. And they often leak, and you see the guys come out and they drill holes in the street, and they hopefully fix the leaks. But we've seen this infrastructure
obviously needing repair. We've seen in a few terrible cases where it's blown up and stuff, and there's a lot of concern about that. Don't they put something in it so you can smell it, because it doesn't actually have an odor. But the point is, we're hooked in, and it would take a tremendous amount from your apartment to my community, my development, to anywhere else to change that over. And so what it would seem is natural gas is not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that's right. Now, what I will say, so I own, as you know, Pete, I own a little house upstate in the Hudson Valley. And when I bought that house, I was determined to, as they say, electrify everything. It ran off of an oil boiler. It had natural gas, stove. And so of course, it costs money, but there's tremendous incentives. And there's even more now than there was when I did it. So I replaced the oil boiler with so-called heat pumps. I put solar panels on the roof, got massive rebates from the state and the federal government to do that. Got a 0% loan from New York CERTA so that I'm not even paying any interest on the loan for the solar. My heat pumps, of course, also produce air conditioning. And so all of my heating and air conditioning, the house didn't even have air conditioning, are run off of solar in the warm months. I still pull from the grid in the days where there's, the days where there's more darkness. And then I ripped out the gas stove. And the major thing is it does involve in enhancement. I had to have an electrician put in a special outlet, much like the one you'd have for your dryer. I'm trying to think that cost me around $750. Not nothing. That's
and I had to do that for my car, for the plug-in.
So you've done this already.
I was the first, to be honest with you. I had 50 solar panels, first in my community to have solar panels and a plug-in Chevy Volt hybrid. And so I want to brag on that a little bit. Also, you said I had to rip out the oil heater. Did you do that work yourself? When you use the word rip, it sounds like you actually got in there yourself and dirtied dirty.
Actually, to be honest, the oil boiler is still just sitting there. So I misspoke when I said I just left it there.
Is that where your children play now? It's a play room.
What's that?
It's a play bin.
It's in the basement. My basement has a dirt floor. It's
So you're talking about how it can be done, and we've heard a lot about heat pumps and how it would be amazing if the entire world, much less federal governments, invested in that and turning those over. But what we haven't talked about, most people probably know, but if you just want to say a bit about how dangerous natural gas is for to inhale in your home when it's leaking. Obviously, it can explode, and that happens from time to time. But more importantly, as a greenhouse gas, it apparently does disproportional damage or more damage than other greenhouse gases. Methane equals bad. Talk a little bit about why natural gas is a bad thing. Before we even get to fracking and getting out of the water and revisiting your book and your latest article on the water.
No problem. Pete, before I do that, if I could say one more thing about if people are thinking about making the investment in a getting off a gas range. So you do have to pay for that electrical upgrade, but with Biden's new infrastructure, I don't know, what is it? The IRA, whatever the IRA stands for. I'm Inflation Reduction Act. With Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, you can now get an $825 rebate on an electric or an induction stove, which would pay for the cost of getting the outlet put in. And so that's something that didn't exist even a year ago. So if you're thinking, well, there's that burden. Now, obviously, if you have a pretty new gas stove, maybe you want to wait until, you need to replace it. But I certainly think when it gets to the point of replacing it, it actually will wind up being cost neutral to replace that.
The legislation includes $4.5 billion in funding for states to provide rebates for the purchase of new electric appliances, including ranges, cooktops, and wall ovens. The Department of Energy will allocate funds to individual states. Each state will choose how to use the funds, sticking to parameters set forth. Wow, I'm just reading that. You could, for example, as you just said, get a rebate of about $840 on a new electric cooking appliance. It's just as Colin said, and everybody should look into this. And wow, I'm so glad that you just mentioned it. And I'm so glad we have a government that passed such legislation investing into America's future and health. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So to get back to the toxicity. So it's hard to overstate how harmful we are learning gas stoves are. So the levels of air pollution that they create, in particular, nitrogen dioxide, which is a lung irritant, would be illegal outdoors. So there are standards set on grills outside, like your gas grills. We don't have standards on indoor quality of stoves. And so families who use gas stoves with poor ventilation, which if you don't have a range hood, which most don't, you have poor ventilation.
A range hood, is that thing that like just goes on top of your stove or each burn? I don't know what that is even.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So a real range hood vents outside. What a lot of people, myself included, have is a microwave with a fan that all it does is suck it up and blow it over your head. That's not actually doing anything. A range hood is a direct vent outside. It's a pretty big investment that actually sucks up the noxious air and spits it outside.
I'm looking at them now. No, I don't have a range hood, and I don't like your tone either. I'll tell you that right now. I got my range hood pierced. No, I am looking at this. It looks like, honestly, it's like a thing that goes over the oven. Honestly, I'm going to say it looks like something that like new homes or like rich people have. Curved range at $1,200. Hoodsley.
There you go. And that's not even installation, dude.
But that's, wow, yeah, that's got to be, I mean, because you got to put a hole in your house, maybe.
Yeah.
Or connect to a pre-existing.
Got to put a hole through the side wall.
God.
So you want to talk about, I got to put in a new outlet for this induction range. Well, if you want to be safe, you got to poke a hole in your wall and put a range hood in too. So
this leads us to the headlines this week, and I'm just going to read some of them. I guess the main one, here's the Washington Post. U.S. agency examines secret pollution source in 40 million homes, gas stoves. Yeah. And then that quickly became, Democrats, Biden wants to take your gas stove. Yeah. Here's a headline, Yahoo News, gas stoves have given 650,000 U.S. children asthma, according to a new peer-reviewed study. I mean, I'll ask some experts about the research and how sound it is, but you can speak to it, I'm sure. But the big headline that I guess scared people was a U.S. federal agency is considering a ban on gas stoves, and the government has come out and said that's not the case, I guess. But what is the research around this, and what are these headlines from yesterday?
So a couple years ago, there was a meta-analysis, which means a study of all the studies that are out there. And what it concluded was homes with gas stoves have a 42%, the children living in homes with gas stoves have a 42% higher risk of experiencing asthma symptoms and 24% increase in the risk of being diagnosed with asthma. And then the new study last week that prompted the U.S. government to express concern was that almost 13% of all asthma cases in the United States, and I should say almost 18% of asthma cases in New York State are caused by gas stoves. And so that's a pretty high. Often when you hear these things, even when people say big effect, a big effect is often like 1 to 3%. To have an effect of that magnitude is really surprising.
In fact is, it's a tough, if you had asthma, or if even worse, your child, because if your child is suffering, it's always worse than yourself. And you knew that there was something like this, and you could fix that. You would do it every time. I don't know enough about cooking. I'm not much for cooking. That people are like, I saw that you tweeted something. You were making fun of Joe Manchin because he was like, you have to rip my gas stove out of my dead hands. I love cooking on my gas stove. I don't really understand why cooking on one would be better than another. But even if I conceded that cooking on a gas stove is better than cooking on an electric range, but if my kid had asthma, I'd be like, you know what? It's going to take a little longer for the water boil and you'll be able to fucking breathe. Like, it's a no-brainer. It's not a question if it were the circumstances I'm provided. Go ahead.
Yeah. And if I could pick up on that point. So we all love plastic, even though plastic pollutes the environment. Well, when we discovered in the 80s and 90s that there were PCBs, this kind of chemical in plastics that was making us sick, and that there were alternatives, we said, oh shit, well, we better ban this because it's giving people cancer, right? When we discovered that DDT, this pesticide, was killing people and that there were alternatives, we said, well, shit, we better ban DDT because we have these alternatives. Now we've got alternatives to gas stoves. It might take you a couple weeks to socialize yourself how to use an induction range, but we have an alternative that does the exact same thing, right?
And you missed the best example from that a news item this week. I'll just help you out here. More than 35 years ago, every nation in the world agreed to stop producing chemicals that chomp on the layer of ozone in the Earth's atmosphere that shield the planet. And this week, I guess we found out that the ozone layer is healed as a result of adding to your list of banning like chlorofluorocarbons. What was it? or something.
CFCs. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Sorry to interrupt you with that important.
No,
statistic,
absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. That was on my list in my head, but I didn't say it. So good
I got
on
your
you.
back. Go ahead though with these solutions, and you were saying about the asthma and
And so that's where we stand. And I think anybody who's reading the media, hopefully, if you've read even a couple articles, you'll see any ban that is even being thought about. And you've actually seen some bans, New York City and possibly New York State now. They're talking about bans on gas hookups in new construction. No single person. Just like, for instance, you might own a vintage car. We now ban putting gas tanks, right? Like right by the back seat of a car, right? Because that was considered, you got into an accident, boom, the whole car explodes, the Pinto, right? We've banned that. If you have an old car that would no longer meet current safety standards, you can keep it. But we understand that now you build new cars that meet new safety standards, right? So the suggestion here is when we build new things, we're going to build them according to new safety standards, but you can keep your old one.
There's a fundamental disagreement in our country, and I suppose a lot of other societies, maybe around the world, about what freedom means, what liberty means, and you're not going to take my my guns, my bullets. I'm not going to wear a mask. And there's this, idea about the, the social contract and so on. But there are certain things, as you just listed, and I just want to add another one. Like, I think I saw yesterday that I guess the Republicans have taken over the House. I'm trying to look it up. They lifted a ban on indoor smoking. Did you see this?
Yeah. Yes, I did. Yep.
Part of the general social agreement. I was in New York. I'm old enough to remember when they banned smoking because I was straddling my career working in nightclubs as a stand-up comedian, basically, comedy clubs. There was always smoke, and then there wasn't. And it was an amazing thing to witness and how much resistance there was. But now if someone lit up a cigarette indoors at a restaurant or even a bar, everybody like, what the fuck are you doing?
Exactly. And to bring that point home and back to this issue, one of the things that one of the recent studies about gas stoves said is the risk for asthma is equivalent to secondhand secondhand smoke in your home on a daily basis. That's how bad we're talking about, right? And so we decided as a collective that I should not be forced in a restaurant, right, or in a public space to have to deal with that. And so this is what we're talking about.
I mean, I actually can't. I just looked it up. I'm surprised there has been more made of this. Maybe it should be left up to people in my lane, but Republican lawmakers are allowing smoking inside the house. Like, that's one of the first things that they changed. Yeah. And what a bizarre thing to do. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So,
but also to get into this point that you're leading us into, Pete, about the politicization of this.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think it's important to mention is that there is, and it's not surprising, but that there is a huge industry lobby that's been operating for decades to hook people on natural gas. Like so to the point where people saying, I love my gas stove, as if that's something that is intuitive or instinctual.
I love gas. I love natural gas.
But this phrase, so if you start getting on a roll and somebody says, now we're cooking with gas.
Yeah.
That was actually an industry PR campaign decades ago.
Oh, no way.
Cooking with gas. Now we're cooking with gas. So there was an actual effort over decades to convince people how wonderful gas is. There was an 80s rap video promoting natural gas. There's all kinds. And right now in the current day, so Rebecca Labor wrote a wonderful article I encourage you to read in Mother Jones called How the Fossil Fuel Industry Convinced Americans to Love Gas Stoves.
I mentioned it on last night's show without reading it. I have not read it, but I was looking at headlines about this and I was like, and now here's Mother Jones' take on it. Go ahead.
And so their more recent work is they've been paying influencers from like people with millions of Instagram followers to like a reality home improvement star to promote natural gas and propane without admitting that they're being paid to do so. So you're watching a home improvement show and the dude is just saying as if, this is objective. Well, whenever I build a new home, I put in a propane gas fireplace. What's nicer than getting that roar of the fireplace without having to bring in the wood and get cold in the winter? And you just sort of think you're getting, unbiased information, but this person's saying that because they're paid by the natural gas industry. And so there's this natural alignment, like we've seen so often, between the fossil fuel industry and conservatives, where, of course, folks like Joe Manchin, who are telling you the last thing that's going to come out of my home is a gas fireplace, are literally getting paid by the petroleum industry. So it's not just like they have this natural affinity for natural gas. They have a paid incentive to protect those stoves.
Yeah. Lots to go on from here. But I think one thread to pick up is how influential they've been in state houses. And it's interesting to look at New York versus Pennsylvania and the grassroots movement in each state. And you're an academic, but I think it's fair to say you're also a reporter, certainly when it comes to the specifics of the natural gas industry, especially as it pertains to Pennsylvania. You wrote a book about it. You lived there. You talked to all of the different players there. And what's the difference between what New York's been able to accomplish from the grassroots activism to the legislation? I grew up in Marcellus, went to Marcellus High School. That's where the shale apparently starts. Like that's like there's a ton of money in the ground in New York State, billions and trillions of dollars, and in Pennsylvania. And but there's a very different legislative paradigm now. And what's interesting is in your new Republic article, you follow up with some of the people and the players in the specific area of Pennsylvania where they have now, you write, bureaucrats and some locals' willingness to restart gas production at the site of the country's most infamous fracking-related catastrophe is emblematic of Pennsylvania's conflicted relationship to the industry. And it maps onto the state's rural-urban political divide. And then you write, as polarizing as fracking is today, it's worth remembering that for most of the 2010s, it enjoyed strong bipartisan support both in Pennsylvania and nationally. The outlier is New York, which in 2014 became the only state with sizable gas deposits to ban fracking. My mom was like, march on Albany, because where they live and, and a lot of my neighbors were, thinking of selling out. So I've said enough. What's the difference? What do you want to say about where we're at?
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing that's important to recognize is how it is a result of activism. There's also some luck involved. So, for instance, when fracking first started to become a possibility and that people could lease their land for gas drilling and, politicians started to hear about the job opportunities that would be there. In New York, we had a placeholder Governor Patterson, right? After Elliot Spitzer's,
that's right.
sex worker catastrophe. And so Patterson quietly signs a moratorium on gas drilling. And he doesn't really care about the political fallout because he's not really going to be there that long. But really, everybody, including him, thought at the time, this is a moratorium of like 6 months while we just sort of get some boots on the ground and figure out what's going on here, right? So at that time, even the moratorium was not a sort of clarion foot on the ground. We're drawing a line in the sand. Like, we're not going to do this. It was just, okay, well, this is brand new. We don't really know what's happening. Let's try to get a handle on this. And meanwhile, at that same time in Pennsylvania, you don't have the governor doing that. And you actually have, people might be surprised now, Ed Rendell, who not only was a Democrat, but was actually the mayor of Philadelphia, is at a time where we're trying to come out of the recession. And, the middle of Pennsylvania is bleeding population. This is sort of the deindustrialized part of the state. And he's thinking and fantasizing about all the jobs this can bring. So he says, great, let's go for it. And not only does he sort of open up the state to fracking, he actually auctions off 130 acres of state forest for drilling. And so you've got this decision. And that, as you mentioned in the part of the article you read aloud, a lot of Democrats in the early days supported fracking. Now it's a sort of partisan issue. But it just sounded great. It sounded like jobs here. We don't have to import oil and gas from other places. And gas, while it's still a fossil fuel, burns, quote, cleaner than coal. So it can be this bridge fuel. And so Patterson, institutes this moratorium. And in the span of the moratorium, Gasland comes out. And Gasland, so this gets back to my article about Dimock. So Dimock, Pennsylvania was one of the earliest places that was drilled. And when they vertically drilled through the water table, gas leaked out into multiple people's water wells to the point where they could light their water on fire. One person's water well even literally exploded, right? And so Dimock becomes infamous as like the worst that can happen with fracking. Josh Fox creates this very explosive controversial Emmy award-winning documentary with Dimmick as its centerpiece. And now you've got the so-called fractivist movement, the anti-fracking activist movement, growing exponentially across the country. And now this is the new terrain in which Governor Cuomo has to decide whether this moratorium is going to get lifted or not. It's a very different landscape than it was in 2009. And so now there's, like you said, you knew folks going to Albany. I start teaching at NYU in 2010. All of my students are taking buses to Albany, pushing for a ban. There's enormous political pressure, and also emanating from the Finger Lakes, right? And so, of course, New York City is the biggest, but also emanating from the Finger Lakes. And so now, and in New York, in Pennsylvania, even if there's misgivings, at this point, it's like the horse is out of the barn. There's drilling happening everywhere. The industry's got this really strong foothold in. And then on top of that, and now you get to where the political landscape makes the difference. So it is the case that, in New York, you have far more Democrats in the state legislature. You've had, after, what the hell's his name? What was the Republican governor before Spitzer?
The Republican Pataki?
Pataki. After Pataki, you consistently have a Democratic governor, right? You consistently have either a majority in the state legislature or close to a Democratic majority. Where in Pennsylvania, the governorship flips back and forth, but you consistently have a hard majority of Republicans in the legislature who are all for this and whose campaigns are being funded by the oil and gas industry. So once the horse leaves the barn and Rendell allows it to happen, well, after him comes Tom Corbett, who his biggest sponsors were the oil and gas industry, right? And so now it gets baked in Pennsylvania, despite the contamination, despite the sort of boom turns the bust and the jobs disappear. And so whereas New York, the moratorium really gets baked in. So even before Cuomo banned it, it was really hard to see by 2014 that he wouldn't ban it, right? I mean, there had been so many catastrophes. There had been so much activism around it. And by 2014, it had become a partisan issue. Now Democrats were moving more towards being against fracking, and Republicans were in favor of it. And so that's sort of the story in a nutshell. The difference there.
Dude, such a great explanation. I'm going to put out just that on YouTube just to help people understand. Yeah, it's really helpful to understand kind of the history of it. And more specifically, you should read Colin's book about what happened in Pennsylvania. But I'm not going to dismiss it without really knowing. I mean, I read the piece, but you reported on it as short memory. But they know the damage that it did. They know the short-term gain that, you wrote so much about it and in such a beautiful way about this community. You talk to all the players, and it's just fascinating when you look at real people's lives and their actual politics and how that sometimes clashes when the money runs out or when the trade-offs begin on your property and all of a sudden it's not your property, basically, because you sold it. What's gone on in Dimmick for them to reconsider allowing the natural gas industry? And as you said, they now have this new Democratic governor. What's happening? What's happening? And why?
So, and to give your listeners a little bit more background on Dimmick. So since this catastrophic water contamination issue that affected multiple homes, there was a ban on fracking, understandably, in Dimmick. And for 14 years, Dimmick residents have been fighting to try to get replacement water, right? So in rural areas and even many older suburban areas, you get your water directly from your backyard, right? Or maybe your front yard, but you got a water well and you're just pulling it out of the ground. So that got laced with methane. And for 14 years, they don't have a permanent water supply. And the drilling company who did it never would provide them with a permanent replacement. So finally, Josh Shapiro, who now in days is set to become the governor of Pennsylvania, but in his role as attorney general, convened a grand jury in 2018. They did a 2-year investigation that led them to a new round of criminal charges against the firm that polluted these water wells in Dimmick. And after those charges, 2 years, they get the company to plead no contest to violations of Pennsylvania state law, and most importantly, to agree to build a pipeline to bring water from a nearby municipality so that folks after 14 years finally have a new permanent source of water. Sounds great. And now this attorney general who took on the oil and gas industry is going to come into the governor's office, and we think, wow, maybe, we're turning a page here, and now like the oil and gas industry is going to be held accountable. But that same day that he announces the plea agreement, the Department of Environmental Protection says to the gas company, you may drill again under Dimick. You may drill again. And it's incredibly surprising to a lot of people. A lot of folks in Dimick understandably feel very upset and feel betrayed. But another perhaps surprising thing was that a county supervisor reported that a number of his constituents were calling him saying they couldn't wait for drilling to resume. And, and you figure for them, why would that be? Well, if the gas gets pulled out from underneath their land, they get royalties every month. I met a dude who got a royalty check in his first month after gas started being pulled out from under his ground for $34,000. $34,000, right? And you figure you're living in this community for 14 years, you haven't had water to drink. You've been dealing with all of the fallout, all of this shit. But because there's no fracking, you haven't gotten any money. Not that money might make up for it, but some kind of recompense, some kind of restitution. And so the way that I think about it is that they're viewing these potential royalties as the only kind of compensation they're ever going to get out of it. It's
certainly out of this.
Right.
You said, but it's also hard to find any income source of money in a lot of communities. I don't remember about Dimick's economics, but I mean, you're not going to make as much money. I mean, by the way, it's free money in terms of like you're not laboring for it. It catches up with you when your fucking house isn't worth anything or something. But it seems like a lot of short-term planning or gains, but you're not having to go drive a bus or Uber or whatever. You wouldn't make nearly as much money, and you're spending, so it's about there has to be economic opportunities that outweigh the royalty check that you're getting for selling your land to leasing your land.
And you're not getting that in most of these places. I mean, where I spent a lot of my time in the greater Williamsport area in north central Pennsylvania, lost over a third of its population over the past several decades. Yeah. And so if you go to college and you're looking for opportunity, you don't come back to this place, right? And you have a lot of people that own land, but they're what people call land poor. They've inherited this property. It might be the fourth or fifth generation landowner, and they worry that they might be the ones to lose it. When the property tax bill comes due, they say, is it even worth it to live on 20 acres? I'm not farming this. Maybe I ought to just move off of here. But they're attached to it. It's been in the family for over a century. And so now this offers a kind of lifeline, an opportunity to hold on to the ancestral property.
Really, really interesting to talk with you about this and pretty much anything. What else before I say goodbye to you and schedule another conversation where we can talk about some of the other issues with you? Would you say did we go from? I mean, it sounds so much like it's very much who the policymakers are being donated to by. It seems pretty clear that most places Democrats are for renewable sources of energy, and Republicans are for dirty traditional legacy forms of energy from the state level on up. Is it that straightforward? Elect Democrats? Is it?
I'm glad you asked that question. Unfortunately, I don't think it's quite that simple because, for instance, so Tom Wolf has been Democratic governor of Pennsylvania for 8 years, and there's basically been almost no change in policies. Now, it would help if he had a Democratic legislature, but it seems apparent that he didn't have that much of a stomach to really make this his hill to die on any more than the Republican governor before him. And you also see that, of course, the other example you see is Manchin. I mean, why is Joe Manchin, a Democrat, still so much allied with fossil fuels?
Coal,
because of the state that he's in, there's still a lot of fossil fuels, right? And so in a lot of these places in the heartland, you're still getting, Democratic politicians who either directly benefit through campaign donations or have constituents who benefit from this. And so certainly you see Democrats more likely to want to rein in the industry in some way. But unfortunately, you don't see a lot of them.
Yeah, it depends on the state and how much that state, how much money is underground, I suppose. And therein lies the conflict. Here's one headline. In one of his final acts as Pennsylvania's governor, Democrat Tom Wolf, signed a huge multi-billion-dollar taxpayer giveaway in large part to the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of money under that ground, but we've got to find, obviously, alternatives around that. And it's so hard because of the political conflicts and the money, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, and
always been the case.
It's really, but I think that, you might often hear, so right now with the whole gas stove thing, the opposition, if you will, is, they love to point out and say, oh, we don't have the electrical capacity. You just want to put everybody on electric stoves, but, we don't even have the capacity for that, as if we just shouldn't do anything because of that. And I think that, first of all, what I'd say is, again, if there even was going to be a national ban, which is hard to see, it would be on new construction. It would not be overnight that now all 360 million Americans, whatever, are
it would be similar to the automobile industry, right? They have put in 2035, you can no longer buy a gas-powered automobile in the biggest state in the country, and most populated state, biggest, So it would be like that for new stoves.
So it would be phased in. We'd have time. And by the way, the new technology right now that is just coming on the market are induction stoves that plug into a regular outlet. And how they work is you have a battery, and the battery, when you're not using the stove, it's still pulling energy to charge itself from your plug. And then when you need it, it can provide the extra juice that you're not getting from a regular traditional outlet from that battery. So we can solve these things without having to say all of a sudden we have to have 20 times as much wind or solar capacity. Otherwise, we still have to use gas. It's not the case. And it's also the case that, a recent study from economists and energy folks out of Berkeley showed that by as soon as 2030, which is not that far away, we could be getting almost 90% of our energy from renewables at no extra cost to consumers. So we can get most of the way there pretty quickly. So as much as we don't get there is going to be because of industry and lobbying and the conservatives who are in their pocket who are stopping us from getting there. Why? Because there's a shit ton of sunk cost. All those pipelines that they are still not done building that they need to operate for decades to get profit from, right? But they will say the issue is capacity. Yes, we do have to figure out capacity, but that's not the main issue. The main issue is the recalcitrance of the oil and gas industry and conservatives.
Very, very, very well explained. So great to talk with you, and a reminder as to why we should do it more often. Colin, I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Oh, man, a lot of fun, Pete. Happy to do it.
All right, there you go. Colin Jerolmack, everybody. At Jerolmack on Twitter. Get his book. Let him know you heard him here on the show, and we will get him back soon. So good, so passionate, so smart, so honest, so empathic. Or is it empathetic? I always get those wrong. And so rich in insight. I love talking to that guy. That was great. Been way too long since I had Colin on the show, and it won't be that long again. Okay, well, now it's time to get to the final guests of the week, and they often are either Christian Finnegan or Ophira Eisenberg, or Christian and Ophira together. They're two of my favorite comedians and closest friends in comedy who I absolutely adore. They're both doing really, really cool stuff. Christian has been pumping out that newsletter, New Music for Olds. A lot of listeners are subscribing and loving it. I really hope that you will go support him there. I learned so much, and it's such a fun thing. It's one of the few things that you can take something from and have it really affect your life right away by going and listening to some of the suggested music that Christian writes about and puts together, mixes. It's really great. New Music for Olds.substack.com right now. And go subscribe to Ophira's new podcast, Parenting is a Joke. I was just a guest on it. If you haven't heard that episode, I would love for you to listen to it and get back to me. Hope you like it. Of course, buy all of their comedy albums, support them. And here we go. We talked about all kinds of stuff on today's conversation, covered a lot, and I really enjoyed it, as I do always, and I hope that you will as well. Follow them on social media. Let them know you heard them here. And here we go. Christian Finnegan, Ophira Eisenberg. Let's go.
Oh, and I was recording as soon as Christian joined in, and then you hear the beep, and you hear Ophira join in, and then I kind of officially start. But we were funny. They were funny at the top, so I just kept it in there. Let's do it. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Now we're talking.
Now we're cooking with gas.
We are literally talking. Now we are literally talking.
Oh, look who showed up.
I don't know.
It's
all right. I got it. I got the energy that I'm walking into.
Look, what would you? Pete said he wasn't sure whether you were going to be here, so lo and behold.
Lo and behold.
What would you name that energy? Negative? intimidating.
But there's a lot. You know what? I'm going to call it what it is. 2023 energy.
It's just a catch-all thing you can just say.
I think Christian and I like together like really like intimidating because like there's a lot of masculinity thrown around. Do you feel that,
Sure.
Ophira?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel it's weird to feel more masculine.
At this point, as well as we got to know each other, I think we should do a reality hour where we do a task that none of the three of us really know how to do, like put up a tent or sail a boat.
I love that.
And then just see how our personalities like see who's like, would you just put that down? And
you mean together or individually?
no, together. We, the three of us, have to figure out like how to, I don't know, do a
like
thing.
an IKEA bookshelf kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize you guys wanted to end this friendship.
Right. Because I feel like it would for sure be Christian punching out quick, you know, where he would be like, you know, just go ahead. You guys just do it. I think I feel that. And then I do remember. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'd be kind of controlling and dicky, and you'd be like patient. And in the end, probably figure it out on your own.
I remember a long time ago now being in a van, like someone drove us in a van to do a gig, couple comics. I was the only woman there to do a gig. Like, I don't know, I think it was in Connecticut or something. It was not that far away. And we got a flat tire and we on the highway and we got out of the guy driving the van did not know what to do. The two other comics that were male comics literally stood by the side and looked at their phone and tried to, I don't know, pretend that they weren't there, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I didn't know what to do either, but I was like, does anyone want like, it was just I felt like everyone looked at me like, can the woman just tell us what to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I felt like.
Well, that's it sounds like a bunch of comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I know. What can mom instruct us?
I got a flat tire while driving with comedian Morgan Murphy on the Jersey Turnpike.
Oh, yeah.
And I got out and changed that motherfucker in front of her and thought it would impress her, but she was still unimpressed by that I ran out of gas enough that me fixing the tire.
I don't know what an impressed Morgan Murphy would look like.
Same as an unimpressed one. No difference. All right, here we go. There they are. That means it's the end of the week, ladies and gentlemen, and people have connected this trio with joy and happiness, unless they haven't. Christian, Ophira, thank you for joining me.
Oh, Pete.
Pleasure.
Man, you are right up close to the camera today. It is okay. It had a bit of a hostage video vibe to it.
I have a hat on. I'm having shed difficulties.
Oh no, the shed's breaking down.
Well, there's literally an Ethernet cable that is dragged across the ground, above the ground, 250 feet from my house out to that shed. That's provided me with a steady, great internet connection for 3 years. I think she's done.
Oh,
I don't know.
But it's just above ground though. You just need to get a new cable, right?
Yeah. But I got to thread it through the house in a hole, and it's a little bit of work.
And you got to buy a 70-foot Ethernet cable.
250 feet.
Oh, sorry.
Wow.
A lot of property.
Wow.
Got a full third
of a new way to brag.
Of an acre or something.
Have you considered burying it? Like,
yep,
running it under the ground?
Considered it.
All right. Well, consider it more.
Have you thought about having like 7 drones keep it in the air at all time?
Yeah.
Or just connecting it to like telephone poles and keep it in the air, like a maple syrup draining tube.
yeah, right.
That's where I was going next. What?
Do you ever have that situation, by the way, where you say to your parents or somebody, I don't believe that you did a thing, and they get really pissed at you? Because that happened to me with my dad last week. I said, have you ever tapped that maple sugar tree? Ever thought of that? And he goes, yeah, I got 5 gallons of sap out of it one year. I go, no, you didn't. He goes, okay, I didn't. And like walked out of the room. I'm like, I really didn't believe that you did.
So he just lied to you and then folded immediately?
No, I think he was telling the truth, but I questioned it and he didn't love that. He's like, I did too. Okay, I didn't. I cooked it up on the grill and it ruined the whole pot, so I never did that again. I was like, I don't know if my dad's ever telling the truth. He tells a lot of stories.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
is it like hyperbole or just utter story?
He will utter. I've seen him lie. I saw him once at like a party at a barbecue, like tell a lady for about 20 minutes that he was a fighter pilot.
What is he?
He just does it for fun.
That's his way of getting a couple hilarity.
He knows somebody's going to she's going to go, did you Chuck Dominic? He's a fighter pilot. And somebody's going to be like, he's lying. He's just bullshitting. He's just making up stories. That's my dad. I think that was my introduction to comedy.
Because it delights him to lie, or does he want people to think he's more impressive?
A little of both, probably, for the same reason I do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people are well aware of your extended fighter pilot career.
Well, most people know that.
But here's the thing. Were you raised to lie?
I watched him tell those stories, and I think that was the more I thought about it, that has a lot to do with me developing a sense of humor, because they were done for comedic effect. Like, he would tell a story and get laughs. And so I was raised he's a storyteller, and I think I watched that. And I think it was mostly harmless, I think. He would allow people to believe those things for as long as they wanted to before they would look them up. They were mostly like ridiculous things, though, that you shouldn't believe.
My mother, who was, a little mentally ill, was also a serial fabulist, like just beyond just crazy shit. Like, somebody be like, my mom said, like, oh, it's going to rain today. And so be like, oh yeah. Oh, really? It's going to rain. She's like, yeah, I've always been kind of a meteorologist. Like, she would just say things that were just completely not true. And it has caused me to live my adult life assuming that everyone is a liar.
Oh, which, most people are liars. Yeah.
Which is, not a wrong thing. It's probably not any more wrong than thinking the opposite. But it does get in the way sometimes when you just sort of assume that anyone who has any sort of strange fact about themselves, that you assume that they're lying to make themselves seem impressive.
I mean, my dad was a liar all the time. And from his point of view, it was a little bit like nobody should, knowing the truth was a very, very inner circle, and everyone else should sort of be lied to.
What's an example?
Honestly.
Okay. Yeah. That was a sort of sign of closeness, that you actually were honest with each other.
Yeah. That you're not telling the truth to the average person. They'd be like, where are you going? And he would be like, oh, we're going to a farm. And it'd be like, we're going to Uncle Jack's house. And he was like, they don't need to know that.
Weird.
I think he had a lot of post-World War II PTSD.
Did your dad fight in World War II as a Canadian soldier?
No, he was not in Canada. This is way before they immigrated to Canada. He was in not yet Israel. So he was underage, lied about his age, living in basically that region was Palestine, and underage asked to fight for the British Army.
That's an interesting time.
As a Jew against the Nazis.
Yeah, I guess, a lot of guys did that after 9/11 of our generation. I guess you could relate to that, but it's still a weird.
Totally weird.
I sometimes wonder, like if I had a righteous war, if if I was of that age, like if it was kind of a clear cut thing, would I, or would I just kind of be like, yeah, somebody else can do it?
I think you would find a middle ground. I think you would find a pragmatic kind of solution. You'd be like, what I can do is cook behind enemy. Like I can.
I would join the USO.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you run the radio station? They had that radio station.
Oh God, I wouldn't be like that Good Morning Vietnam asshole, would I?
They recruited me as they did. I said it like I was somehow talented. The military recruited me in high school. So they recruited every person, men and women, in the late 80s, early 90s. And the guy was like, I was in a room with a bunch of other high school kids, and he's like, well, what do you want to do for a career? I was like, I want to be like in entertainment. I want to be a comedian. He's like, you could do radio in the military. Like, you ever see Good Morning Vietnam? I was like, you could do that? He's like, oh yeah.
It's such lies.
Wow.
Lies. Absolute lies. Like,
and
I'm sure
skits at night.
1 out of every 10,000 people that gets to do something fun like that.
My brother showed some interest in joining the Army, and so the recruiter then drove over to my parents' house at one point, and my dad, my aforementioned dad, met him in the driveway and sent him packing. He was none too happy he'd come to recruit my brother. He's like, get out of here.
Yep. Oh, I mean, and then we're
patriots.
Yeah, I do know quite a few people who enlisted. I never met a Canadian. I did not know one Canadian friend who enlisted in the Canadian Army. I feel like I know so many.
Well, there's only
American...
5 guys.
Yeah, and as I always like to say, we have a cannon, and it's in a museum.
Did your dad fight in World War II? You saw combat?
Yeah.
Did he? Maybe we've talked about it, but did he talk about it at all?
No, I think he talked about it maybe to my other siblings, but by the time I came along, I feel like those stories were long buried. But my sister has this photo that I have to get her to peel out the next time I see her, where he is standing with some sort of machine gun, and there's like a bunch of German Nazis that are sitting crouched over with like hands behind their head, and he's with a couple
German
other soldiers. Yeah, and they're laughing. They have guns pointed at them, and they're laughing.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just to make
yeah, I was like, I don't know who. I do not know German. Right, exactly.
I'm glad you know.
There's other Nazis out there, as we all know. I wish it was redundant, but yeah. And,
it would be nice, yeah.
It would be nice.
It never was in retrospect, but usually, that was. Oh, that's crazy.
And anyways, I don't know who took this photo. I don't know who printed this photo. Like, the fact that there's even a photo is very weird.
Yeah. I was briefly enlisted in the KISS Army, which might not count.
I wanted to, speaking of lying, I wanted to ask you both your thoughts on, if you've paid attention to or kept up with this guy from your neck of the woods there. He's the new Congressman, George Santos. He apparently has lied in a way that, like, comedians or like a screenwriter, like, if you made up some of the lies that person told, like, no, don't do that one. No, that would be too egregious.
Right.
Don't use that one. Christian,
much.
I think we talked about him last week, but I mean, the more lies that come out, and now Republicans in that area, in his district, like leadership, are demanding he resign. Can he stay for another week, much less his whole term? Kevin McCarthy's okay with him until there's proof that he committed a crime, he said.
I feel like people should give him a chance.
You do?
Nah, I don't know.
I would be like, what happened to Christian?
Like what chances could you give this guy who's lied about literally everything?
Everything.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's wonderful, and I hope that he stays for a long time.
Yeah.
And I hope that he just continues to be a punching bag for as long as he is in the House. And of course, McCarthy, he's got a four vote margin. He can't afford to, bargain away 25% of his majority, because it was a Democratic held seat until recently. It was Steve Israel's old seat. And so it's like, I would like to think that with all the scandals and everything going on, that Democrats would have at least a 50-50 shot of winning that seat in a special election.
Yeah, they do. They would have a good shot, apparently.
Yeah. So I feel like they got, yeah.
His point of view is very much like, well, he's never really done anything to me.
Yeah.
It's like that high school thing.
It's like that. Well, it's like that in adult life too. Like I know this guy has been an asshole. This comedian has been an asshole to you two, but he's always been cool to me. So I'm fine with him.
The worst. Nope. I want utter pure loyalty from my friends, or nothing.
What do you think about his lies? Have you ever told such even one lie like that, Ophira, to get something?
I've told lies, but it's me. I have no power in this world. I'm not representing anyone.
I bet this guy probably didn't expect to have any either, is my guess. I mean, I think that if it wasn't for, that Eric Adams, crime is running rampant and all of the sort of, the only place there was a red wave was New York State. And I think a lot of that, in a normal cycle, I don't think he would have won. In fact, I sincerely doubt he would have won. He kind of got swept in on the coattails of the anti-crime shit. And, like I said, I'm enjoying it, and I hope he sticks around.
It's crazy. It's great. But I mean, you've never told a provable lie about a thing to make yourself look like you, as a comedian. It would be like saying, I performed at the Montreal Comedy Festival when you never did. Maybe you attended, or I think headlined.
Tons of people do that, by the way. I think tons of people. I think there's fake credits all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first, I think the second or third feature gig I ever did, there was the guy who was headlining was just some impressionist douchebag, and it was down the Jersey Shore somewhere, and the MC was like, what are your credits? And the guy was like, Leno, Letterman, Premium Blend, whatever. And I had just done Premium Blend, which was an old Comedy Central show. It was like my first TV credit. And I was like, oh my God, I just did Premium Blend last week. Like, which season were you on? And he's like, oh, you've done it? Oh, okay. You can take that one. He's like, oh, okay.
But I will say that, with the credits thing, and I just brought that up an example of how I do think comics lie, but also the idea of being introduced as with these credits just on a regular good club night is now like all the comics are like, why are we doing this?
It's so dumb.
Because it's meaningless.
It's meaningless.
So many,
Yeah, I mean, to me, the only thing it does is it just lets the audience know this person has done stuff. They're a professional.
Actually should be here.
I think that's a good idea to give anybody credibility before they address an audience of people, no matter what. No?
Yes, but I think it's been so like, the joke, of course, was like if someone didn't have a credit, they would just be like clubs and colleges, right? So it's already eating itself up in real time. It's just like, what was even the point of that? And then so many people have whatever fame and what have you following from podcasts and the digital world. So as that progresses, sure, I think we all would, if someone says they were on the Tonight Show, it feels like this thing, but in reality, like there may be more people watching X YouTube video of this comic than there was ever watching this person on the Tonight Show.
Yeah, and also,
I think comedians are mistaken about like they think that people are going to remember this and be like, "Whoa, oh, that podcast, what was it called? I'm going to look it up." It's like, no, it's literally just a permission to relax for the audience. Right. That's all it is. It's just you're in professional hands.
I'm going to change my intro to "You've seen him on the internet."
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, well,
I mean, I feel like a lot of the comics with really impressive credits, if I'm hosting, they'll say, just say next guy's really funny or like whatever.
Yeah.
They're like, no credits. Don't do it.
I think it'd be better. I think there's an argument to be made. I would like my intro from now on to be like, this guy's never done stand-up comedy before. Like literally never done it. And then I'll fucking blow them away.
Love it.
With my level of professionalism.
Or really mislead them. He introduce you as a profession. You don't actually, joining us now is a civil engineer. And then he comes up and does comedy.
Oh my God.
And he's the funniest civil engineer of all time.
I've seen funnier comedians, but I've never seen a funnier civil engineer.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good.
So for a few years ago, for a podcast that was doing a live podcast, they wanted to pull a ruse like that because it was a social science kind of podcast with this big following, but they wanted to, one of them was like, I want to try stand up. So I was a plant in the audience and they were like, can you like come up and we'll introduce, like when we say, does anyone in the audience want to try stand up for the first time? Throw your hand up in the air, we'll introduce you. And then like kind of stumble through your act, but get better and better and better. And so I was like, oh, I'm totally into this. And let me tell you, I like annihilated, of course, because there was no expectations, and it felt so good.
Well, what a letdown! Did they ever like let the audience in on the fact?
Yes, they did. Yeah. Yes, they did. Yeah.
Sadly, she ripped off her mask, and it was Ophir Eisenberg. They're like, yeah, I still haven't heard of her.
That's a funny thing. There was no mask, and it worked just fine.
It had to be for my joke. Yeah, that's really. I'm trying to think of another example.
Pete's comedy comes with certain requirements. You have to sort of just there's all sorts of artifice that you have to sort of go along with for Pete's comedy.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. That's how it works. I bring the baggage.
And then this has just made me think of this. Judy Gold was it was a very well known comic, and at one point the Carnegie Deli, which I believe is gone in New York, that was like an institution, right? And it's gone. Mm-hmm. But they would name sandwiches after people, and they named a sandwich after her. And her son said to her, "Was it called Who is Judy Gold?"
Oh, it's brutal.
Oh, that's lovely.
Her own son. That's absolutely
and
hilarious.
I can even see her glower at him.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So there you go. That's what credits mean.
This week with you guys, I'm starting a new segment. It's called Asshole of the Week. It's really original, and it's just where I nominate.
I don't know. Mine's looking pretty good this week.
Is that right? What have you been doing, by the way? I've heard about this.
Some whatever the anus version of bejazzling is.
You bedazzled your anus
around.
Bejeweled.
Yes.
Your anus? Aww.
Yeah, people have been saying nice things about it. So
wow,
at the gym and.
Wait,
just CVS. You know,
Why is your anus out at CBS? That doesn't seem appropriate at
because
all.
it's Thursday, Pete.
Well,
What?
maybe stranger things have happened. Bejeweling the anus wouldn't be that far fetched this day and age.
Nope, not at all.
Now, the asshole of the week this week, I've decided, is UFC President Dana White, who announced that there would be no punishment for him for publicly hitting his wife. And it's just weird. This guy's always been, I guess, you know, an asshole for a lot of different reasons. But I just was thinking about this. It's like, man, there's a lot of, let's just keep it in the arena of athletes, much less other well-known people, who are credibly accused of, maybe arrested, maybe even admit to some kind of domestic abuse, partner abuse, whatever. And they get suspended. If it's an athlete, they, you know, sometimes for the harsh penalties, but it's usually not on tape. I do remember like one football player has like a horrible video of his beating up his girlfriend in like an elevator.
In the elevator. That was
I remember that. It's so indelible, but like there's video of this guy smacking his wife. There's video of it. And I guess, I don't know, when you're the president of a fighting club, maybe it's different. Asshole of the week.
Yeah,
Dana White.
it's like, but that's what he does. That's what he does.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a sport by, of, and for wife beaters. So
Domestic Abuse Association. It's pro. It's the DMA.
I mean, you know, it's yeah. I can't express any shock at that.
Right. If he was CEO of Apple and it was on camera, that'd be different.
But do you also think like we are just like on camera? Like I feel like we are just 100% desensitized to on camera. Like I guess seeing it in real life, like let's just say there were 5 witnesses or whatever watching that. Like that's one thing. But I just feel like there's so much very violent video that's on social media and TikTok and whatever. Like, I wonder, I just wonder if it all just feels like, I don't know, whatever.
I mean,
I've seen the video.
Yeah,
it's, you know, it's at a nightclub, and
right.
You know,
and I'm sure that happens.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that the excuse is, she very clearly slaps the crap out of him first. But it's like, it's not like he's trying to hold her arms back or something. And like she smacks him and then he sort of reacts and then smacks her back and then smacks her a second time. So, you know, the idea of like she hit him first, it's like, okay, yes, that is technically true. But that dude had a good 2 seconds, you know, which is a long time to sort of size up the situation and maybe
and as
not
we say,
hit her.
Make a different choice. Maybe he could made a different choice.
Dana. I'm not
Dana.
saying you aren't forgiven or you're the devil if you ever do such a thing. I'm not trying to make myself, but I don't know if my wife or like my daughter one time took a swing in anger. I've probably never shared that publicly, and maybe I'll edit it out, but whatever. I like the idea of striking back at someone I love, and I have, as you know, anger issues and impulse issues and emotional, like that's something that, like, that's a behavior that you should be worried about. It's one thing if you're fighting somebody and it's another person like you or whatever, it's a stranger, but like I don't know. I've just never felt that I would ever want.
Never
to.
like sat there in your own anger.
No, I'm very angry. But if you swing at me, if you're like my wife and you swing, I would be like terrified. I would like run. I would run. I'd be like, "What's wrong with you?" I'd yell at her. Maybe I'd try to stop her, but I don't know. I wouldn't swing back, especially.
I would just think about all the mileage I was going to get out of it in arguments over the following years.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
You'd be storing it. You're just like, whatever. Was this caught on tape by any chance? Was this caught? Did anyone get a good video of this on the high quality iPhone?
What an opportunity to look like a magnanimous new age man by not reacting.
That is true. Oh, you're right.
On camera. Also, if you're a giant dude like him, you would think you'd even think about it even more. Like if I have a paw instead of a hand like that guy does, you're going to do some damage if you hit anybody, I'm guessing. But I did like his... He
probably is always like, I want to use this paw. How can I use this paw? Can I hit something?
All right. Asshole of the week is Dana White. Any objections to that? Did anybody you want to nominate over that for asshole of the week? And otherwise, I'm moving on to seeing just how important Jeff Beck was to music, Christian?
Oh,
I mean, he was very important. I was never a massive fan of him.
I love this immediately.
Wow.
Why?
Mm-hmm. Because I kind of felt like you were going to say that. Like you were like, oh yeah, well, I don't know.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a very, it takes a lot for a 49-year-old man to want to say, okay, boomer. But the people who are really like super upset about Jeff Beck, to me, kind of fall into the okay, boomer thing. I mean, he had a very unique sound, and I owned a Jeff Beck album back in the 90s, I believe. But I wouldn't say that my life is any less full.
Did you get rid of that Jeff Beck album, or do you still have it?
I mean, it was a cassette. So, I mean, I don't physically own it anymore. Jeff's Guitar Shop, I believe it was called. Honestly, it's like, to be perfectly frank, when I think of Jeff Beck over the past 10 years, I think of him as like doing dumb shit with Johnny Depp on stage, because they were like best friends. Oh. And of each of them wearing just way too many fucking scarves and rings. That's some sort of dumb puffy hat. I don't. And so to me, when I think of Jeff Beck now, and I know that he meant a lot to a lot of people, I think of a guy who's like 70 years old and still trying to like dress like some weird kind of bohemian, like hobo almost, like he's dressed like some dude riding the rails, but in like, Moulin Rouge times. So, I don't know.
But you bring up something I have thought of a lot. How you guys don't wear a lot of rings, but the style for men, and I think it's a lot of guys in rock, but that's the style, just 1,000 rings. I've always found that very.
An LA thing. I think it's a very LA.
I have a strong opinion. I have a strong opinion.
Okay.
A lot of vests.
I like a vest. Do you like a vest? You don't like a vest over
just
like a
too
t-shirt?
Many fucking accessories, like 8 necklaces of different lengths dangling around. Just too much.
Okay. That's what I was going to say.
Take one thing off, Jeff Beck.
Yeah, I draw the line. I look for functional fashion. I think if you have a crazy hat, all right, but at least it's a hat. It's on your head. But if you had 3 hats. If it's a real crazy hat, but no jewelry, even on women or men. I mean, I find it. I don't wear any because I'm better than you. If you do, but like the idea that there's excessive jewelry, it seems like you're trying very hard to. I don't know. Are you a gypsy? It's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of prep. And I know I'm being very judgmental about this, and I know it could be very creative. And people love that, but I don't trust a person who's wearing rings on every finger. What are you? Making a potion? That's not
a lot, and more than one ring often on every finger.
That's insane. You're a murderer.
Rings.
Yeah, multiple rings.
What's your relationship?
Leather straps around the wrist, and just come on,
Christian.
Right, straps. A lot of leather straps around wrists. Like bondage.
Hold on, you went through a phase, Christian. I mean, did you never do bracelets and rings?
I wore a ring for a couple years, a solitary skull ring. For a couple of years, like a ring of skulls. It was like a ring of skulls that I think I bought somewhere on St. Mark's Place off a table. If I'm not mistaken.
And Ophira, are you wearing any now? What is your relationship with accessories and jewelry, Ophira? You're a lady.
I mean, I like jewelry, but I don't wear a lot of it. I wear my wedding ring, and I will say this though. This is just a total stamp thing. I like wearing. I hold the microphone when I'm on stage with my right hand, and I like wearing a ring on that because I feel like people are looking at my hand in my face, and I feel like it's like a little bit of adornment.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That's thought out. It makes sense. It's purposeful. It's not hitting you over the head with it. It's weird that it's a mood ring, but
right, and
it changes as your act is going.
Well, Pete is known for wearing one of those candy rings. That's right. On stage, and he sucks on it very seductively between jokes.
I would love that.
I used to put on the candy necklace with the elastic thing, and I would chew on it while it was on me. I would just eat that fucking chewy.
Yeah, did you go to raves? Were you taking?
Never.
Molly?
Yeah, were you rolling? Huh?
Never went to a rave.
I was big into I had the puka shell going on.
Oh no!
Yeah,
For
I
real?
can totally see you
but
in
like
that.
the black circular puka shells, not the like jagged surfer ones. The black circle puka shell, and then I had a little pirate hoop earring that I would wear.
Oh wow!
Oh, and you did not have a puffy shirt that you just made fun of with a vest?
No, I did not.
And
I did cuff my t-shirt sleeves.
Oh, and so where did you have any friends?
This was kind of a look in the 90s, sort of that Jeff Buckley look. Pete, maybe.
By the way,
that was what I was going for. That sort of like, slightly greasy hair, kind of swooped down. That sort of Ethan Hawke and Reality Bites kind of thing. That was sort of my 90s look.
You know me and my
dirty Johnny Depp.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, you're right. Honestly, that archetype grew up to wear 18 scarves. And
that's right. There was a while where, before I feel like he took Pirates of the Caribbean costume seriously. Like after that, it was all that.
For sure.
You know me and my embarrassing lack of knowledge and understanding of music culture, everything. And I shit you not, when I heard that Jeff Beck died, I was like, hey, Jeff Beck, didn't he die a long time ago? And I was thinking of Jeff Buckley, who is a guitar hero, who was died too young, and people you revered. I'm guessing.
I do quite.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he is dead, and so now is Jeff
Beck.
An
image model for Christian.
That's right.
Yes, still to this day, in the sense that I now look like a corpse.
So, and I wanted to ask you, Ophir, about your new one person. What is this? Leaving a Mark, a comedy about scars. Indeed. It's going to be how many nights in early February, and throughout you're going to be doing it throughout February at the Soho Playhouse. We're all very excited. What is this? What are we doing?
What am I doing? I am doing I'm doing a solo show. I'm doing an off-Broadway run of a solo show for 7 nights, 3 weekends in February. And it's a show called Leaving a Mark, a comedy about scars, because I'm covered in scars. I'm like actual scars, like flesh has been torn and resewn because of, actually most of mine, with the exception of 2, are the work of surgeons. So I guess it's artistry. I have a lot of scar artistry on me because it's not my work,
if you will.
I love that.
I don't know how much I want to ask about it because I just want to say go see the show. But is it true you naked looks like an old pair of jeans, like patched all up? It's just, and all of those are all signs and
Raggedy
symbols.
Ann.
Raggedy Ann.
Ophir is assembled by Tim Burton. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I will say though, because some of my biggest scars are old, like they're from when I was a kid, and they were not as they were just not as good as it now is now, and also not controlled circumstances that they kind of look like industrial. Like it's like, was that a surgeon or 3M? Like it's there's the surgeon technology was not quite and also like a couple of them were done fast, very fast. Mm-hmm. So but this is like, these are harrowing tales, but it's also very funny because that's the way it works. And there will be a notable special guest per show. I was obviously thinking about asking someone on this podcast who I know has a pretty notable surgery scar, and audience interaction, because I don't know how well you remember Jaws, but the first time I saw Jaws, the scene that popped out to me the most is when they are literally having a scar competition, and they're drinking at night in the hull of the boat, and they're basically like showing their different, scar bites in this case. And I just loved that. And I have been involved in one or two, kind of a bunch of guys at a bar being like, see this thing on my elbow? That's like when I hit the lawnmower the wrong way. And I'm just like, I'm going to wait this one out and then win.
And then she just lays out that straight flush on the table.
Well, I'm flattered that you thought of me. My vasectomy scar is really not notable. You can't even see it. So I'm not sure why.
Well,
you mean because Christian opened his chest up? Oh, you're talking about Christian's scar.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll talk to you about any of your scars, Pete. Bring them on. But I do know that Christian fairly recently had his entire chest opened.
The worst part of my scar, and I may have just mentioned this before, is it is very ever so slightly not straight, and it drives me insane. Like it's so vertical, funny. And then right at the end, it kind of like curves off to the left just a hair, and it drives me. Like I find myself trying to like adjust my skin, trying to make it straight. Like it drives me crazy.
Well, it's good to know you have no OCD.
No, not at all.
That is a weird thing to have something. Oh, well, it's not in the center of your body. Is it right there at your sternum?
It's right down the front center.
Yeah.
Where does it end? Like, are they skipping around your belly button, or does it end way?
No, it doesn't go. It doesn't go that far. It goes down to about my sternum.
Yeah, because mine is
who the hell says
belly
button to another adult, by the way?
Mine skips my belly button, I think on purpose.
My belly wowie.
What do you say?
I realized when I said that. I realized when I said that to slam you. You both looked at me like, everybody. What do you mean? What do you say? I was like, oh shit.
What else do we have?
My navel.
Oh, navel. I was thinking of an orange.
Very excited about the show. If you're in New York, go see Ophira at the Soho Playhouse. Leaving a Mark, a comedy about scars. And the people that you might bring on will have a scar to talk about.
Yeah, they will if they want to do. I mean, mostly they'll be stand-ups. Truly, so if they stand up on their scar and they want to do that,
I love it.
Or I will lead them in a interview, either called Scar Talk or a Scar is Born.
Love it. Can't wait. I'll be there watching, cheering on. Like I always say, I will, and then I won't show.
Okay, great.
Looking forward to that. Looking forward to another empty promise. Yep. That's right.
I do have an entry for Asshole of the Week.
Oh, it's me.
Oh, just kidding. I love you.
Nominated 3 weeks in a row. Thank you both for joining me. As always, we really appreciate ending the week with you. And lastly, how is your January going so far? It's supposed to be you both have made big commitments. And I know if you're really big on positive affirmations and slogans and goal setting and so on. We are 2 weeks. We're 2 weeks in, Christian. 2023. How's it going?
Well,
you nailing it?
It's going great till I got COVID last week. But
no,
wait, you did?
Yeah, when I was on with you last weekend. Last week I had COVID. I hadn't had it diagnosed yet, but yeah, that was COVID.
You got COVID while you were talking to us?
I got COVID Wednesday night, and then we recorded Thursday, and I was saying that I was slightly under the weather. I was talking about my resonant radio voice.
Yeah, that's right.
But yes, that was that night I had a 102.2 fever.
Oh man.
It was it was like 3 crappy days and then another couple of annoying days, and then it was over.
Did you still do your spots?
Absolutely. Of course. I don't want to deprive the world of my genius. In fact, I did all my comedy, and then I leaned over the front row and I just went,
that's good.
And I just breathed all over everybody.
That's great.
They deserve it. They bought a ticket.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. That sucks.
I wish I'd had more spots I had to cancel. But
wait, had you had COVID before? Yeah, you had.
I had not.
You had not had it.
Oh, I thought you had. I thought you had it.
Not to the best of my knowledge. My wife thinks I did at some point, but I had never tested positive. So, but yeah.
So 3 days of misery.
I'm so sorry.
Well, I said on Twitter a long time ago that, you don't need fancy charts that based on my history with trends that will know COVID is over when I get it. And I think we can all just assume that the pandemic is now officially over. So congratulations to everybody.
Great news. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, thank you.
Finally.
Speaking of hope.
About time. Speaking of hope. All right. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, and I really appreciate you guys talking to me today, and I'll talk to you hopefully next week.
Thanks,
bye,
Pete.
fellas and lady. What? Bye.
Fine. It's fine.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is it. That is a week's work, that's for sure. Great episodes this week, a bonus episode this week. Very excited to have you supporting the podcast, listening to the podcast. Tell your friends, sign up for a subscription, and have an awesome weekend, everybody. I'll be talking to you Monday. Already know we've got Dr. Aaron Carroll joining us next week. Emily Atkin of Heated is going to join us. Hopefully Nayyera Hawk will be back. I've asked Odessa to reach out to a bunch of guests and She's booking them and doing a great job, our intern, Odessa Son. Thank you very much. So excited to have you joining us for the first week. Thank you to John Carroll, to Pete Coe, and to everybody who contributes in so many different ways to this podcast every day. Can't ever thank you enough, but I will talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Love you guys. Be the change you want to see. Meditate, read, write, exercise, feel good. Life's possibilities are unlimited every day, so never give up. I'll talk to you next week, everybody.
Stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, 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 come on. Stand